Hello and welcome back to the Red Path. Today we're going to look at the best ways to deal with Mortarion as a World Eaters player. Okay, so Mortarion is the new hotness, and everyone is posting videos on how to deal with him. I don't really want to jump on that train, but here we are. Mortarion and the new Death Guard Codex are going to alter the meta one way or the other. I don't think Morty is broken or overpowered at all. In fact, I think the Death Guard Codex is well rounded and balanced, and is a great sign of things to come. To me, it looks like GW has finally figured out the balance between fluffy rules and internal competitive edge. Before we get into the meat of it though, I want to quickly shout out one of my subscribers and member of the Discord, Royal Purple, and display some of his Instagram stuff. I always get jealous when I see folks who can paint to this sort of quality because damn. Respect. I'll put a link to his Instagram in the box below, so go check him out and give him a follow. Also, the gods of the algorithm have instructed me to remind you to hit that subscribe button. I wish I was skilled enough to make an animation here with a berserker chopping the sub button to pieces in a fit of rage, but I'm not, so we get what we get, I guess. Alright, I'm done with the admin, let's get back on track. Yes, Death Guard are strong, especially against factions still using 8th edition codexes, but it looks like we're moving away from the codex creep of previous editions into a gradual balancing act, fingers crossed anyway. We can be sure that some books will be slightly better or slightly worse, but hopefully everyone will get some unique flavour and spice to make them interesting, so we can move away from a 2 or 3 list dominant meta into something more like stone scissors paper, where every list has a counter and it can come down to generalship and experience over easy mode lists that play themselves. Nevertheless, a competitive list will now have to have an answer to Mortarion. For the most part, a solid list should be able to deal with an elite power armor marine faction, so the remainder of the codex should be within most people's grasp, but Morty adds a new threat level. With exceptional resilience and devastating offensive capability, a strong list has to be able to check all the boxes it previously did, score primaries, score secondaries, deny opponents with better board control or counter-offense, deal with a marine stat line, deal with 20 Necron warriors, and now deal with a TA 18 wound monstrosity. So how can we as World Eaters do this? And to a lesser extent, how can any combat-focused army continue to do this? There's a few list archetypes that have some successful World Eaters. Victor Schuborg's board control list from late last year. Check this video for details on that one. Mark Perry's MSU assault list, very similar in playstyle to Dan Brook from Hellstorm's efforts with the World Eaters. I'll put some links in the description for recent back reps of these guys using the World Eaters competitively, and also the Blood Tide strategy I've used recently. Here's a link to that one. I'm beginning to lean more towards the MSU assault style list, but I am concerned it just doesn't have the chops to deal with particular armies. But the way rules and codexes are shaking out, I wouldn't be surprised that a variant of it ends up as our go-to in a few months when a codex does finally drop. But that's a bridge to cross later on. For now, let's look at how we can deal with Mortarion with what we have. First, here's what we're up against. 18 wounds, toughness 8, 3 up armor, 4 up invul, and 5 up feel no pain, reducing incoming damage by 1. He's a character, monster, psyker, and a demon, as well as all the other typical keywords. He reduces toughness and shuts down auras within 3 inches to boot. He flies 12 inches and has optional additional buffs as well, depending on which play company he's selected as. There's 2 ways you'll need to consider Mortarion being played: in a pure Death Guard army and in Chaos Soup. In a mono Death Guard list, Mortarion's threat is somewhat reduced as his initial range is 12 inches movement and up to 12 inches charge, which in most cases will leave him out of a turn 1 charge if Death Guard go first. This changes in a Soup army as he will absolutely be the target of warp time and be in your face in all but the rarest situations. First, let's assume you're facing mono Death Guard. Foremost, check your measurements. Assume you will go second and Morty will be shoved 12 inches towards your lines. It's possible he can be reserved or hidden, but if that happens, it buys you time to deal with other threats. We're going to assume he's coming for you. Depending on which mission you're playing will determine whether he can assault you in the first turn, and whether you frenzied any units pre-game. There's 2 ways to approach this. First, ensure none of your units can be charged by Morty turn 1, leaving him potentially vulnerable in the midfield, or 2, bait him with a frenzied unit allowing him an easy charge to get closer to your lines, overextending himself. If your army is equipped with some decent firepower, I would opt for the first strategy, but if you're a combat heavy army, which you probably are as a World Eater, you're going to need to lay a trap. You'll probably be using Frenzy anyway, as it's a great stratagem, but the idea here is to place a juicy target for Mortarion in such a position that after his 12 inches of movement, he has a fairly confident charge, say 8 inches or below, so he can assault that unit and wipe it off the map. This will bring Morty right up into your lines, separated by at least 2 turns of movement for the majority of his Death Guard forces, except in some of those drones. This will allow you time to engage and perform defeat in detail. So, frenzy a solid unit, maybe a squad of raptors or a HQ unit, whatever it is, it's a sacrifice. It will die. It's a pawn you are sacrificing to allow your knights to capture their queen. Hope that Morty kills it and ends up just outside your DZ. You do have a slight chance that a Chaos Lord with a 4-up invuln could roll supremely lucky and survive, in which case it's time to blow some CP and chip a few wounds, but I wouldn't plan for that. Now, Mortarion is close to you at this point. You may have taken some relatively light incidental fire from Plagueburst Crawlers or the Blight Haulers, but hopefully your cover and terrain mitigated most damage. Now, you have to take care of Morty in your first turn. So let's look at the math of how to do the necessary damage, and we're going to work backwards. This is how I tend to math hammer when determining what I need to use to kill something, so bear with me. First, Morty has 18 wounds, so that's our goal, 18 damage. The thing is, with a 5-up Feel No Pain, he's going to save a third of whatever breaches his saving roll. So realistically, we actually need to do at least 27 damage to bypass his Feel No Pain and kill him. So that's 27 wounds bypassing his 4-up invuln. His 4-up invuln is saving 50% of whatever damage we do get through to him. That's assuming we're even using AP at this point. So ideally we do want to use AP1 weaponry, and that will balance volume and efficiency to get the most damage over time. Luckily we do have access to several of these weapons. So the 27 wounds we need to get past his invuln is 50% of 54. So we actually need to get 54 wounds. If we use the tools at our disposal to get a buff to wounds on 4s, we will need to get 108 hits through. Now, it's possible Morty will have -1 to hit on him. In fact, it's probable. So to get our 54 wounds and 108 hits, we'll likely be hitting on 4s. So we'll need to roll 216 dice to mathematically kill Mortarion with strength 5 to 7 weapons with AP1, dealing 1 damage each time in one go. So when I began to run the numbers, I completely forgot about Mortarion's debuff to auras, and the information you'll be seeing on screen right now originally included Khan and Exalted Champion. However, they won't affect units in combat. With Khan and an Exalted Champion, you can actually kill Mortarion in 1 round of combat with 20 Berserkers, using both Khan's full rerolls to failed hits, the Exalted Champion's full rerolls to failed wounds, Veterans of the Long War, and Stoke the Nails. However, you'll see, without those rerolls, it just doesn't mathematically add up. Given that a 20 strong unit of Berserkers is our most absurdly killy choice, and if that won't work, what will? Well, we need to look at the problem. As I've mentioned, the strategy is about defeat in detail. We need to use every phase available to us to whittle Morty down to his end. This begins with the lure to bring him in closer to our lines. It then includes any and all shooting that is not strategically more valuable elsewhere to be focused on Mortarion. Depending on your opponent's actions, it is possible that some shooting may be required to clear objectives or weaken other foes, and so on. But what assets can we use to damage the Primarch? The problem with rushing Mortarion with everything is that he can and will interrupt and absolutely demolish you. So the strategy as I see it is thoroughly unworld eaters, but maybe the best we can do at the current time. Once you have lured Mortarion closer to your lines, you must essentially sacrifice your mobility for a turn or two to ensure the Primarch dies. Given that you are probably facing Death Guard, they will take a little while to reach their primary threat range if you use cover and terrain to your advantage. What you will need to do in your first turn is chip a few wounds with shooting. Don't forget the Demon Shell stratagem on a Lord for D3 mortal wounds. And then charge in 1 unit that can deal damage. And what unit will that be? Okay, so here's some ideas. You remember back in early 8th edition, well before Faith and Fury, There wasn't really a wealth of choice for our relics, so you may remember using one called the Murder Sword. So, on a successful hit, it deals a mortal wound against a declared character. There's two ways I can see this as being part of a sacrifice. Number 1, an exalted champion with the Murder Sword. The champion rerolls hits against characters. It is not an aura, so it is not switched off. If he hits on a 2, he does a mortal wound. There's no need to roll against his toughness. He can get 6 attacks on the charge, and depending on Mortarion, he'll hit on 2s or 3s, re-rolling 1s, again it's not an aura, for a fairly solid 4 to 6 mortal wounds, of which Morty will prove resilient against 1 or 2. Similarly, you could risk it all on a Red Butcher's Terminator Lord with Disciple of Khorne, which allows him to re-roll hit rolls and wounds for himself. This is not an aura. Again, you could run the Murder Sword or even Gorefather here, and pray that that 4-up invuln keeps you alive long enough to use the second round of attacks. Third, a squad of 10 Red Butchers Terminators equipped with Bolter and Claw will push through about 7 wounds in their first round of combat with Veterans of the Long War. If you add the Banner of Rage, Solterra Portent from an Apostle, Stoke the Nails and Vets, you'll get through about 10 wounds in that one phase. In 4th place, going back to my favourite World Eaters list of pre-Imperial Armour 2020, is the Dual Land Raider Achilles, with Khan. You now get 16 of the new multi-melter shots, so if Morty does come close, you can roll up to be within 12 inches, use Khan for rerolls, and should get about 16 damage through. Other options for damage include anything that puts out mortal wounds, soul burners for example, or any stratagem and relics you particularly like. It's worth checking out some of the more esoteric Forge World options like Lasers Destroyers or the Relic Dreadnoughts. Even small things like the Dreadclaw's Mortal Wound Bombing Run or Flak Missile on a random missile launcher you have can slowly help bring the Deathlord down. As for dealing with him strategically, as I mentioned, if he's running in a Mono Death Guard list he will not be warp timing, so prepare to bait him. Also, find out which Psykers have Miasma of Pestilence and ensure you frenzy a unit to be within denial range of them if possible, so you can play Scorn of Sorcery. Denying that power will vastly improve your ability to bring the Primarch to his knees. If your opponent has souped, however, and does have access to warp time, prioritise a frenzy to deny that sorcerer. It's better that Morty can't assault you for a turn and has -1 on him than can assault you and tear you apart. If you know a warp time attempt will be coming, I would recommend deploying your forces in multiple parts of the map and pre-measure to know where his most likely charges can hit. 24 inches of movement with Flyer plus whatever charges he can make. Use terrain to your advantage here. He will have to go around or over due to him not being infantry, a swarm or a beast, and that's how charges work now, with regards to terrain at least. But make sure you separate units so he can at best only demolish one of your assets in combat. Remember that heroically intervening is not really a good idea in this situation, as he can choose to attack your heroically intervening unit if you begin the fight phase in engagement range, regardless of whether he declared you as a charge. If you end up going first, position your forces so you can maybe tear a few wounds from Mortarion early, and so when he does make it to the centre field, you are ready in position to spring forward with a decent melee unit in round 2 to damage him in combat. Every unit you hit him with will likely die. Prepare for this. The point is to keep assaulting him phase after phase after phase so you can bring him down at the top of the 3rd turn or earlier if possible. If you can manage this, you will still have 1500 points of Death Guard to deal with. But in theory, you should have been playing 2 games at the same time in any case. The units you built in as earmarked God Killers and those who will score and delay the remainder. Whatever happens, ensure you are playing the mission as you work on Mortarion. He is a major threat and we don't really have any amazing ways to deal with him, but we can and we must. I'm personally excited to go against some Death Guard. I've had decent luck against Marine armies and would like to give these new Nurgly Slime Balls a good honest punch up. Alright folks, that's enough of this one. Let me know in the comments your thoughts and advice on dealing with the new Death Guard. I'd be interested in what you have to say. As ever, if you've enjoyed the video, leave a thumbs up. If not, leave a thumbs down. I'd appreciate you hitting that subscribe button, and remember, stay healthy, stay safe, and kill main burn.